mosquito, frozen in time for millions of years, and trapped within it, well, that discovery would change our world. For a while, we thought that this was as close as we could get to dinosaurs. Turns out, we were wrong. Years of research into how to complete the DNA sequence for a dinosaur led us to this. Life unlike anything seen on this planet for 65 million years. Jurassic Park. We know how well that went, but what if someone like you had been there to temper some of that rampant hubris? For Jurassic Park to succeed, you're going to need to make sure it's safe for all your guests. This is the adventure of their lifetime. We don't want it to be their last.
Hello and welcome to Chaos Theory Mode, where today we're going to be taking on the original Jurassic Park challenge. Now you're probably looking at the length of the video and thinking, wait, how did he complete the challenge in that amount of time? And the truth is, I'm just that good. No, I kid, I definitely did not do it in that amount of time. I mean, the tutorial section alone takes like 45 minutes, so no. This challenge took me about 4 hours and 30 minutes to complete, which is insane. I love how lengthy these Chaos Theory modes are, and I can't wait to play the others. So this video is a showcase of our progress throughout, including some of the best bits from the run. I hope you enjoy, and let's get into the video. So, the start of this challenge is extremely slow moving, with various instructions on what to do, albeit with a healthy budget of 21 million, which should last us until we open the park. We place down a visitors centre, a science centre, and look over our scientists so we can research and place down a hatchery. The fact that the game's actually telling us exactly where to put these buildings and operations centres should tell you everything you need to know about the speed and what we can do at this point in the game. It's basically like a tutorial.
Velociraptors. Yes, we're going to start with raptors. I know you may have concerns.
Yeah, actually I have a few. This is why it failed the first time.
But both John and I agree that they represent some of our most viable candidates. You'll need to synthesize their eggs using the available genome research I've provided.
And so we do just that, incubating the raptors against our better judgment. There's even a part where it fails and we have to research a better incubation method. But they're here, they're finally here, and I can't wait to see the raptors emerge from the incubation centre as a pack, and... Oh, they're bugged. So, we don't get to see that. Yeah, this really needs fixing pretty quick. I actually tried this with every single dinosaur that came out of the hatchery throughout this playthrough, and not a single one worked. All of them were like this, and it's such a shame. I just can't wait to see it. Anyway, moving on from that disappointment. Now we just need to add some important buildings. A response facility, a viewing gallery for the velociraptors, a paleo-medical facility, and I've decided to add a small power station, as backup generators are not a viable option in the long run, so setting up our power network early is for the best. Our next task is to add a Triceratops to the park, so I've sent our scientists out on an expedition, and I've added a staff centre which will allow our scientists to rest when needed. I've also begun work on our main hatchery, which will allow us to transport dinosaurs to their enclosures rather than having to build one hatchery per enclosure. A massive help. After this we start work on the Triceratops enclosure, because it takes quite a while for the expeditions to come and go, as well as extracting the DNA from the fossils. It's definitely a more lengthy and costly process than in the original JWE, so watch out for that in your playthrough. We finished the enclosure and it's looking pretty good. Nice and neat alongside the raptors with room for a future viewing gallery. While I was waiting for the Triceratops to incubate, I actually noticed these raptors being a little bit sneaky near this fence, a little bit suspicious, kind of sizing it up. We better watch out for those guys, but they reminded me a lot of Muldoon when he used to say that they would size the fence up for weaknesses.
I remember.
Once again, the Triceratops don't emerge from the hatchery in a cinematic way, instead opting to just pop into view outside of the doors. We transport them over to their enclosure, with me not realising you can actually directly airlift them from the hatchery until later in the run. Great job, Matt. They're looking pretty comfortable in the new exhibit once I add in some forest, so we officially have 2 species and can move on to the next objectives. Our new tasks are to increase the dinosaur species in the park to 4, to build a functioning park tour, and to ensure enough dinosaurs are viewable from the tour, for which we'll need 5. These are all things that cannot be done at the drop of a hat. The park tour needs researching at the cost of time and money, and the expeditions for the Parasaurolophus and Struthiomimus genomes will take time also, alongside the extraction of DNA from the fossils. In the meantime, I decide to build the enclosure for the 2 new species, which will sit opposite the Triceratops exhibit. With this, you can see my vision for the park starting to take place, with each enclosure tightly packed into smaller areas so I can maximise our efficiency. It means less ground for ranger teams to travel, less for guests to walk, easier access to each facility and enclosure, and more room to develop the park in the long run, as I have no idea at the moment of the scale of the challenge and what it's going to take to reach 5 stars and complete the mode. Now that the park tour has been researched, we can begin to set it up so that it passes through our current enclosures, and once that's finished we can also incubate the Struthiomimus eggs for our 3rd species. This means we get to witness the miracle of these dinosaurs emerging once more via teleportation. What a spectacle. Incubating the Parasaurolophus eggs is next on the list, and while I'm waiting for that I notice that the raptors are not pleased that the tour runs through their enclosure. Funnily enough, we have this safari park in the UK where you can drive through a certain area, but at the risk of your vehicle being torn to shreds by monkeys. Yeah, this is worse. It's at this point that I finally realise we can airlift dinosaurs straight from the hatchery. What a revelation! And then comes a slight hiccup. Once you've completed the objective set out for you, 3 dinosaurs will fall automatically sick, and you just have to cure them, so it's not too bad. And once that's done, you're ready to open Jurassic Park.
Welcome to Jurassic Park.
Now we've got to focus on the guests, with our new objectives being to raise our restroom, shelter and accommodation levels to at least 90% for guest comfort. I start by constructing 3 hotels right behind the Velociraptor enclosure, and all I'll say with this one is that I've always maintained that I would stay at a Jurassic Park or a Jurassic World if they were real, despite the risks. But if the hotels were behind the Velociraptors, there is no way I would stay, so I'm not really doing Ian Malcolm too proud with that one. I spend a fair amount of time now adding restrooms and emergency bunkers, as well as researching and constructing amenities for my guests. I love the detail behind each amenity now, and how you can customise them for different guest types to maximise profit, as well as making them look cool to fit in with your park. You can also research larger ones as you go along to house more guests. It's just a really great system, and it helps to make your parks more unique. Now that we've got decent coverage for our guests, we're moving on to 2 new enclosures, as it's time to expand even more. Our new objectives require more species, more profit, more guests, and a greater star rating. So I'm thinking Metricanthosaurus and Styracosaurus. The Metricanthosaurus will be housed closer to the hotels, and the Styracosaurus will be the farther exhibit. Whilst I'm waiting for their DNA to be extracted, ready for incubation, taking photographs of your dinosaurs can be a nice break which offers some solid cash. I did this a few times throughout and probably totaled up at least 2 million from my various flights. I then spend some time setting up and decorating the 2 new exhibits and adding another power station to the park now that we've expanded. Keep in mind I've been adding amenities and various other buildings to support the expansion, so power's starting to be required on a greater scale. And then, disaster. A storm hits with the potential to ravage my park. It's not too bad luckily, and I'm able to repair everything and get back on track, but here's a key piece of advice for these storms that everyone should use. Use the pause button to stop time and analyse every piece of information available to you. Every time something is damaged, you can pause time, evaluate your surroundings and decide what to prioritise fixing so that you have the best chance at coming out of the storm unharmed. I didn't use it this time, which wasn't the best practice, but for the future more deadly storms I utilised it with great success. After the storm, we incubate our Styracosaurus, and before long they're ready to be transported to their new enclosure. We ensure that they're comfortable, which doesn't take too long given the prep we put in before, and then it's time to transport our Metricanthosaurus to their enclosure. We're making really good progress at this point, and before long we hit that 3-star mark and complete the most recent objectives. And then, well, John wants a T-Rex.
The allure is instinctual fear.
But what we're really looking for is something bigger and better.
Do you want a T-Rex?
Can I have a T-Rex?
Here's the issue with the T-Rex. It's expensive. Real expensive. You can see that while I'm building the enclosure for its future arrival, then I've got about 1.2 million at my disposal. And my profit at this point was about 300,000 per minute, which is pretty good. But not enough for the T-Rex, and here's why. The T-Rex costs about 2 million per expedition, and so it'll cost you 4.1 million for the expeditions alone to get you to about the 70 to 80% genome mark. Now of course you only need 50% genome, but you're going to want a better T-Rex than that if you're spending this kind of cash anyway. The incubation and synthesis of the eggs also costs a fortune, so if you're not careful you're going to blow all of your cash on this one dinosaur and then be left with relatively little if, say, a storm hits or an issue arises. I'd say all in all that the T-Rex cost me about 6 million to create, and that is bonkers. So I came up with a different strategy. I realised that funding the T-Rex by expanding the park a little more and doing my own thing rather than following the objectives was probably a better idea, and so I pursued the Apatosaurus instead to drive up our profit margins. Whilst extracting the Apatosaurus DNA, I noticed that one of my Parasaurolophus was unwell, and it turns out that there are now certain illnesses like the common cold, which can't be treated and will usually go away on their own. They spread through direct contact, and in some cases can be fatal if the dinosaur can't recover. That's crazy! I love how the new illnesses and injuries system works, because it actually feels unique compared to the previous game where it was a simple research and dart for literally every single illness. Now it feels like its own living system. I've now created an enclosure for the Apatosaurus and placed it in the middle of the Metricanthosaurus, Styracosaurus and the hotels, and it turned out really nicely looking back at the footage because it complements the others well with its circular shape. Then, another storm hits. Again, it doesn't cause too much damage, but it does batter the dinosaurs, causing at least 4 injuries throughout the park. This is new. I have to build a new paleomedical facility to treat my injured dinos and pray that another storm doesn't come in before we complete the challenge, as the next one could ruin everything we've built. Finally, the Apatosaurus are ready to be moved into the new enclosure. There's one. Yep, nice. And here comes the second. Oh my god, what the f is that? That is seriously creepy. This is so much worse than the Triceratops Struthiomimus Velociraptor glitch where they kind of just pop into view. This is actually offensive to the eyes. If we can ever get that image out of our head, the Apatosaurus are quite majestic and seem to be at home in their new enclosure. So we can turn our attention now to the task originally set for us, which was to incubate a T-Rex. This takes a few steps, including researching 2 lots of carnivores in the Science Centre, totaling 2.5 million spent on research alone. To grab some of this money back, I go out taking photographs again, which claims back about 500k in total. Nice. You can see how much progress we've made by this point, and it's starting to look like a real park compared to what we started with. I love seeing how far we've come, and this is a great example. Now that we're becoming busier, I decide to connect our paths and convert some of them to the wider paths, which allows more guests to walk through crowded areas. Now, while we're working on the T-Rex, that alone isn't going to get us the 5-star rating, and so I'll need another big ticket dinosaur to get us there. Enter the Megalosaurus, which is one of the deluxe edition dinosaurs. Now I think this one will also be expensive, but that's almost the point. This is because by the time we release the T-Rex, we should already be making a ton of money, and we'll need a couple of amazing dinosaurs to hit that perfect mark. Here's where I've set its enclosure, and I think it's a nice fit alongside what we already have, tying the resource area in and making a true ovular path around the Apatosaurus enclosure. From here I add another power station, which will likely be the last one we need. And then a storm hits again. This time I'm well aware it could be terrible for our park, and so I utilise the pause time button to help evaluate and clean up anything affected. Some fences did break, but we repaired them in time so it wasn't an issue thankfully. the pause button is a saviour. Unfortunately, one of my Metracanthosaurus caught pneumonia during the storm, which can't be healed and has to pass by itself, an extremely worrying development. Now, it's here that I was originally going to add the Megalosaurus before the T-Rex, but when I thought about it, this wasn't the best idea. The main reason being that the Megalosaurus has a lot of bad trait chances, and I'll need to research some of the adaptations to get rid of that chance, which will take more money away from our ultimate goal of getting the T-Rex. I decide that they can be brought in afterwards when we have more money and know what our next set of objectives are, and we finally go all in on the T-Rex we've so desperately been grinding for. I finish off the enclosure by adding some viewing galleries, and now it's finally time to transport it. Now, here's where the game tries to throw you a curveball, because the minute you select the T-Rex's transport location, somebody sabotages the gates and opens several exhibits. Amazing. Luckily, the ones that open for me are either into other exhibits or are close enough to a ranger vehicle that they won't matter too much. Whew. Now that we've managed the crisis, I want to get a look at our majestic Tyrannosaur. Okay then. The game is amazing, but there have been some really weird glitches so far, and I'm hoping they can patch them soon as they're a real immersion breaker. I then tried replacing the T-Rex's fence with the more durable one we'd recently researched, forgetting that fences don't build immediately anymore. Jesus, that was a bad idea. Instead, I opt to sort of double wall the enclosure to give us more time to react in an emergency if needed. I really wanted to see my T-Rex hunting, and luckily I managed to catch a glimpse, but the Rex failed to catch the go. It's really odd, but I actually haven't seen one successful hunt on this run. I kept watching the raptors earlier in the run, and they never managed to catch one either, so I guess I just got really unlucky. Now I'm just building profit to fill out the remainder of my park, so there isn't much going on besides me just sending out expeditions, extracting DNA, and gaining money to spend so we can achieve the 5-star rating and the next set of objectives. I decide that alongside the Megalosaurus I want some Euoplocephalus in the park, and begin to extract their DNA ready for incubation. Whilst I'm waiting for the Euoplocephalus extraction, I decide to incubate the Megalosaurus, which will hopefully give us a big push towards the 5-star rating, especially now I've improved its DNA by getting rid of its undesirable traits. It'll also get us one closer to the species required total of 10. Luckily I do get one great egg with no bad traits on the first batch, and then on the second batch I get 2 more ideal eggs, which is brilliant. The Megalosaurus requires a population of at least 2, so I needed that second batch, but unfortunately I misclicked here and only incubated one of them, meaning we only get 2 in total, not 3. That missing third one would have surely put us over the 5-star rating, but it just wasn't to be. I add a viewing gallery to their enclosure ready for their arrival and make sure they're comfortable before I can get a good look at a brand new JWE dinosaur, and it looks amazing. I now finish up some final details to the park which should really help us to nail the 5-star rating, including adding a large hotel and some amenities near the T-Rex enclosure, as well as converting all of the paths to a wider variant, helping to ease congestion. It's finally time to incubate the Euoplocephalus, and I'm thinking of adding them to the Apatosaurus enclosure while we're already so close to completing the challenge. It turns out that they're comfortable with ankylosaurids, so that'll work. I unfortunately only get 1 egg on the first batch, so I need another, and I get 3 this time around, but only one of them has no bad traits. That's a shame. As this species only requires 2 to be comfortable, I use 1 from each batch and hope that it'll be enough to complete the challenge. I again misclick. I don't know how I keep doing this, and I release the Euoplocephalus into the hatchery enclosure instead of airlifting them, so we get to end the run by watching the magic of teleportation one more time. It seems fitting. I try to tranquilise them and add some of the food they need into the Apatosaurus enclosure, and while I'm doing that, we complete the challenge. No way. It looks like we really were as close as I thought after all. Oddly enough, there isn't a closing cinematic, so I've added in my own from capture mode to showcase what we built. This was a grind, but I loved every minute of it. It's exactly what the first JWE should have been like, and I'm so happy we have Chaos Theory here for the sequel. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did and it's not too much trouble, I'd love it if you could leave a like and subscribe, as we'll be playing through the other Chaos Theory modes too, with those videos being in the same format. Until then, have a good one. This is the Fossil Fool, signing out.